Good day, my name is Dante Martinez and I'm a solutions architect with Emphasis Stelligent. Today we're going to demonstrate the usage of the three types of security controls inside of a CI/CD pipeline. Today's demo is built around data storage, but the concept applies to application or data transform pipelines as well. A quick thanks to Paul Duvall for putting this demonstration together. Paul was a founder of Stelligent and is now the chief evangelist for Emphasis Stelligent and is a recognized AWS community hero. Okay, so first let's take a look at the types of controls we'll be demonstrating in today's demonstration. The first type of control is a preventative control. The purpose of this type of control is to prevent insecure or misconfigured infrastructure, data sets, or application code from being deployed. In today's demo, we will see how the pipeline stage functions as a gate to block a misconfigured EBS volume from being deployed. We are using Stelligent's own open source CFN-NAG tool to conduct static analysis of the CloudFormation template used to deploy our EBS volume today. CFN-NAG is open source and available for anyone to use, and it does static analysis of CloudFormation templates for security controls and configuration controls as well. The second type of control is a detective control. The purpose of this type of control is to detect and audit control violations. Our demo today will deploy an AWS config rule set from the pipeline, and we'll take a look at how that control reports on an out-of-band and insecure deployment of an S3 bucket. Finally, the third type of control we'll see is a reactive control. This type of control monitors your live environment for control violations and automates notification events and mitigation. In today's demo, we will watch for the output from the AWS config rule that we showed in the detective control, and we'll use CloudWatch to watch for that event and trigger an automatic remediation in the form of a Lambda function. Okay, so let's hop on over to Code Pipeline, and here we have our demonstration pipeline today. Very simple pipeline, but you could incorporate these concepts into pipelines of all complexities and types. So here we have just a source stage. This is simply pulling the code and executing it into the pipeline. Here we have our build stage. This is where we are executing the CFN-NAG tool as part of the preventative control. And then finally, we have a deploy stage here. And in this pipeline, all we're doing is simply deploying the AWS config rule set and the CloudWatch and Lambda functions that are required for our detective and reactive controls here today. Okay, so you'll note that our build stage is currently in a failed status. That is okay because our developer has attempted to deploy an EBS volume with an insecure configuration. It looks like he has left off encryption today for us. So let's go take a look at the details here. So here you can see we're running the CFN-NAG tool. And that tool is analyzing a CloudFormation template called volume.yaml, in which our developer has attempted to deploy an EBS volume without encryption turned on. So here you can see we're getting a warning for the lack of KMS key attachment, and we're also getting a failure because the server-side encryption has not been enabled. Because of that failure, our pipeline is currently sitting in a failed status for that incorrect configuration. Okay, so let's go take a look at this volume.yaml template. And here you can see that our developer has attempted to deploy this EBS volume with encryption disabled. So let's go fix that. We'll update that to true. And we'll add our commit information here. Okay, so we've edited that template file, and this time we have enabled encryption on the volume. The pipeline should pick that change up shortly. Let's see. Okay, so you can see that the pipeline has picked up the change for us there. It has processed the source stage, and it is now in the progress of re-executing the build stage for us. So it's rerunning that CFN nag check on the code this time, and it should pass for us this time. We'll give that just a moment to pick the change up. Okay, so as you can see, this time the stage has passed. We'll go take a look at the details here. Here you can see CFN nag executing once more. This time we do not have any failures on this. So the stage passes this time, and the pipeline allows you to proceed with your deployments from here. Okay, so we've demonstrated how a detective control can be used inside of a pipeline to prevent insecure configurations from being deployed. Okay, next we're going to show you how a detective control can be automated inside of AWS. So we're going to hop on over to AWS config here. Go take a look at our rules here. So as you can see, our pipeline deployed an AWS config rule set here. And we'll take a look at this rule. You can see that this rule is added to check your S3 buckets and ensure that default encryption is enabled, or that you've got a policy in place that denies put object request for buckets without encryption. Now, as you can see at this time, there's no resources inside of the scope. That's because I haven't created the bucket here. So one common scenario you can work with detective controls is developers or operations teams deploying infrastructure out of band, right? So they're doing manual deployments of infrastructure or application code that isn't done inside of a pipeline. So you can use a detective control to pick up those types of errors in deployment. Now, our scope on this rule for demo purposes is limited to this bucket only, which I have not yet created, but we'll do so shortly here. And you'll see that after creation, we'll come back here and it should pick up a non-compliant resource. Okay, so let's head over to S3. And we're going to create that bucket. And normally you would leave your AWS config rule scope much broader, so you'd pick up any resources being created there. I'm going to use all defaults for this, so that will build us a bucket that is unencrypted. So we'll come over here and take a look at the properties. And as you can see, encryption is currently set to none. Now, it does take a moment for AWS config to pick up those changes. So we'll head on back to config and rules. And I'm going to pause just for a second, give it a moment to update the system, and then we'll do a reevaluation here to pick up the new bucket. Okay, so the resource has finally been picked up. And as you can see here now, it is showing in a non-compliant status because we have manually configured the bucket without any encryption. We can click into the detail here, and you can see that it's showing non-compliant with one rule, which is the rule that we showed you earlier, where it's looking for non-encrypted buckets. I do want to show you the dashboard in here real quick. So AWS config does supply you with a quick review of what's going on with your environments. And as you can see here, we are reporting the one non-compliant rule in effect, and it will even show you which rule is in effect here, or you can actually go and take a look at your individual resources here. So here we have all of our S3 buckets in this account, and as you can see, it's showing the bucket we created, again, non-compliant here. So this is an example of a detective rule, and the idea here is simply to report violations of controls to you through a quick dashboard or report, and then you can take action on those on your own. So there are opportunities inside of AWS config itself to do remediation, but I wanted to demonstrate that separately here as a separate reactive control. So we'll go take a look at that next. Right, so we're going to switch over to CloudWatch here. And here you can see we've added a rule here. This is our reactive control inside of CloudWatch here. And what it's doing here is we're actually taking the output from that AWS config detective control that we just took a look at, and it takes the output from that and is actually searching for a set of criteria that we've codified in here. So in this case, we're looking for S3 bucket server-side encryption to be enabled here. So if that's in a non-compliant status as reported from AWS config through its event, then it will actually execute this target down here. And in this case, that target is a Lambda function that we've created that will do the remediation for us. Okay, so let's go take a look at this function. And as you can see here, the trigger for this function is that CloudWatch event rule that we just showed you. And the function itself is simply running an additional filter for the non-compliant status. And then it is applying the server-side encryption by default setting. So we're going to go AES 256 on that bucket. So when this is triggered by the CloudWatch event from AWS config, it will execute this function and then go correct the configuration of that bucket. Okay, so that's probably had enough time to actually execute. So let's go take a look at S3 now. And as you can see, our bucket now is configured for AES 256 with encryption. So our reactive control took the output from the detective control, AWS config, took the event, and triggered an automatic remediation via Lambda function, which corrected our bucket configuration for us automatically and with no interaction from myself. All right, so that's our demo for today. And again, just want to do a quick review. So we demonstrated the use of a preventative control inside of the pipeline, in this case using the Stelligent CFN-NAG tool to do an analysis of a CloudFormation template and prevent templates that are misconfigured with security controls not in place. So in this case of the demo today, we had a misconfigured EBS volume through the volume.yaml template, and we demonstrated the pipeline blocking that. We demonstrated editing the template to correct the misconfiguration and the pipeline allowing it to proceed. We then demonstrated a detective control using AWS config that searched for a rule for an S3 bucket that was not configured with encryption. We manually created that S3 bucket out of band and allowed AWS config to pick up that configuration change and then report it on it. And I showed you how the dashboard shows you very quickly which resources are not in compliance. And then finally, we took the output from that AWS config event and built a reactive control around it using AWS CloudWatch and Lambda function to automatically remediate those controls. Using these three types of controls, you can have a nice layered system that gives you end-to-end security of your data resource deployment and application and data transform deployments as well. So in this case, we were looking at data storage configuration infrastructure, but you could use these controls as well to manage data access and authentication, networking, compute resources, as well as data localization and classification and metadata rules. So really any type of control that you need around getting to accessing or using the data as well. And finally, you can also use it to simply configure your data resources. So that includes encryption for data at rest and in transit, as well as security events and threats. We can also layer on a threat analytics tool behind this that uses a mixture of CloudWatch and Athena to give you further data on potential threats in your environment. So thank you for watching today's demo. Again, I'm Dante Martinez, a solutions architect with emphasis Stelligent. If you'd like to learn more, please check us out at www.stelligent.com. That's STELLIGENT.com. And look forward to working with you on future solutions.